Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. It is the eve of the solar eclipse, and later a UK astronomy professor will be here to tell us why you shouldn't miss it and how to watch it. That's in a few minutes. But first, on Kentucky Newsmakers, Lexington Mayor Jim Gray is here. It's been a dramatic week since the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia that led to a young woman's death. In the wake of that deadly demonstration, Mayor Gray announced he was speeding up his timetable for recommending Confederate statues be relocated in Lexington. After hearing from dozens of speakers, the Urban County Council voted unanimously on Thursday night to relocate those statues. Lexington leaders will have 30 days to figure out where to move the statues. Then it's to be submitted to the Kentucky Military Heritage Commission. All of this came up after what had already been a busy summer in Lexington with a wave of shootings, the passage of a new city budget, the city also with some eclipse events going on, new firefighters also graduating as well. Mayor Gray, who has done lots of national interviews this week, is here to tell us, the local folks now watching, about his feeling on this issue and others. Thanks for coming, Mayor. We appreciate it very much.
You bet, Bill.
Why did you make the recommendation when you did in the hours after the violence in Charlottesville to speed up what you had recommended before?
Well, I had decided earlier, weeks ago, that we were going to present a resolution to the council recommending the relocation of the Confederate statues. On Saturday, I was watching at home these tragic events that were unfolding in Charlottesville. Immediately went to the office, convened a group of our folks at the office, and we were working then on comments, on a response to the tragedy in Charlottesville. We already knew that we were planning to present this to the council this week on Tuesday, and I made the decision that we needed to accelerate that announcement. We needed to let people know what Lexington was intending to do, and that's what we did. Now, Bill, you know, in my view, this was all about doing the right thing at the right time. There's never a perfect time to do what's right. It's all the time. We needed to deal with this issue. Let's look at it from this perspective. There's really a tragic irony at the site today, the site of these Confederate statues. It was once Cheapside auction block, where slaves were sold to auction, where men, women, and children were sold to auction, to a life of slavery. On this same site, these Confederate statues have been standing. Now, that's just not right. So the decision to make this shift and to make this relocation and to put these statues in appropriate context, the appropriate context really of reflecting an accurate history. When we face our history, when we're accountable to it, as inconvenient and difficult and challenging as it may be, it frees us and it gives us the opportunity to have the conversations, to have the discussion, to face up to a history, troubling history, and then move forward.
What have you said to those or about those who spoke at the meetings and other places who have said that it is erasing history to remove those?
Telling the accurate history is what this is about. The accurate history is that these statues were erected the period of Reconstruction, the period of Jim Crow. This was a time when the history of the Confederacy, what was then characterized as the lost cause, was in many respects romanticized. And the real history, the accurate history of the Civil War, the Southern cause basis in an economy based on slavery, was not being told, hadn't been told. So African Americans especially, African Americans, that history was being lost. And our African American brothers and sisters were facing these statues routinely every day with all the symbolism that it represented. We heard from people last night, it was as moving a history lesson as I suspect I will ever have in my life, of what these statues and the symbolism of these statues to black people, and what their removal from the center of our city, such a prominent location, especially where once justice was ostensibly being carried out, we heard from them what this represents and what it means.
How?
So it's not about erasing history. In many respects, this history is being told for the first time right now.
How did you feel when you looked out after that unanimous vote and saw the faces in the crowd who were there for the meeting?
Well, I characterize it, someone said that it was a celebration. I characterize it as a tribute to those who have been so patient and so persistent, especially the Take Back Cheapside, those in the Take Back Cheapside movement. I was so inspired by those people. They met with us over the last 2 years during the time that the Arts Review Board was meeting and examining this issue and recommended the relocation. They met with us several times and they defined patience and persistence in a remarkable way. So looking out at that audience, the council members actually were standing and clapping as much in tribute as anything, tribute.
As you know, other cities have made similar decisions or face similar decisions at this point, but there have been many, including the president, who have questioned the removing of monuments. And you had some tough words on national outlets about what the president had said.
Well, the president has just increased the tension and the stress. The cities are having to deal with this issue with literally no support from the president, who has customarily been, our president is customarily the one who reassures us, who tries to discourage tension and violence. And we've not gotten that from this president. This president has been as weak as any president in my lifetime in dealing, in communicating clearly that our country is not about violence and it's not about hate.
How important was it that the cost of moving those monuments somewhere else can be deferred by donations that apparently are being offered?
I was really pleased to receive an offer. 2 local companies called me and said, you know, we've got experience doing this and we want to help the city out. We want to help the city out by moving these free of charge. Now, will there be some expenses that aren't yet identified? Of course there will be, and that's why the Bluegrass Community Foundation already had established a fund. Some local leaders, Deborah Hensley, former council member, Adrian Wallace, Van Meter Pettit, they already gone to the Bluegrass Community Foundation and set up an account where we could raise money for this effort.
So you've done what you can do on this locally with that vote and the unanimous vote. It is now up to the Kentucky Military Monument Commission. Do you have any signal from them how they might look at this?
Yeah, actually the Military Heritage Commission, but yes. Monuments even makes it clearer. And the Military Heritage Commission has the authority over any move of these statues. And they will expect a relocation site. We're very hopeful that, especially after this unanimous vote by the council, which reflects representation, this council represents our citizens. Our citizens are speaking out today. Of course there are different points of view, but the job of elected leadership is to make decisions after informed points of view are expressed to us, after we engage our public. And that's what's being done. So I certainly hope and frankly expect that the commission will be helpful.
So you will make your recommendation. Do you, at this point, know where you will recommend moving those to?
No, that's what we're going to be examining over the next 30 days, Bill. Being able to put these statues in proper context, truthful context, an accurate history will be so important. You know, when you look at Lexington and you look at the Civil War and its effect, we were divided. Lexington was divided. The state was divided. Brother fought against brother. I had that in my own family generations ago. Brothers fought against brothers, the Battle of Shiloh. Union side, Confederate side. If you look at Lexington, just in our small downtown, Jefferson Davis was educated at Transylvania. You walk from Transylvania down the street and you pass Henry Clay's law firm, his office, his little office, where he fought for years, for decades, to preserve the Union. And then you walk past Cheapside, the slave auction block, and then even those statues today. So much of the Civil War was really reflected right here in Lexington, giving an opportunity to illustrate the truth of this divisive battle and its signal moment in American history. That's a real opportunity for us, and not neglecting the African American, the influence of this period and the significance of it on our African American brothers and sisters.
Are you confident, Mayor, that if there are white supremacist groups who come to demonstrate here as they did in Charlottesville, that public safety can be managed?
Absolutely. We have one of the finest police departments in the country. Our police chief, Mark Barnard, has been preparing for events like this, and he prepares for them, and our police department prepares for them routinely. Already engaging with neighboring jurisdictions, Louisville, the federal and state jurisdictions, units that would support us. Of course, our police and our intelligence units have been monitoring the conditions. The police chief has said it well. He said, these people want attention. Don't give it to them. These people want attention. Don't give it to them. Pikeville is a good example of just earlier this year, an event occurred there where white supremacists were demonstrating there, and they managed it.
This was already an eventful summer for the police department, as you know, and there have been situations, in some cases, random violence at this point, which is a major concern, and the police chief has acknowledged that, and all these shootings and so forth. How concerning is that uptick to you? Well,
of course, public safety is our first priority, and what I have confidence in is the strength, the integrity, the professionalism of our police department. Now, regrettably, across the country, we have conditions today, especially associated with drug addictions and drug trafficking, that are causing significant challenges for us. At the root of so many of these shootings, at the root are drugs. At the root are these kinds of challenges that we've got, cultural and social challenges, but we're working on this. We're working on this through a recent initiative called One Lexington, where we are bringing together all the agencies, working to bring them together and to better manage, better communicate what we're doing and why we're doing it, and therefore be more effective and more efficient.
The eclipse is coming on Monday. As I understand it, the city has some events planned, and you're going to be at least one of those.
I am going to be, and we're going to have the eclipse glasses. I don't know exactly what they're called, but I know that everybody's been calling me asking, where can I get these glasses? Home Depot sold out of them, you know, and other stores are sold out of them. Where are we going to get them? Well, if you go to our parks at the appointed time, I'm told that they're going to have them.
Now, this is, I think you had 2 or 3 particular ones where they'll have these events.
Yes, right. We're going to McConnell Springs, Raven Run, and Thoroughbred Park.
All right. Mayor, thank you for coming at the end of a very busy, emotional week in Lexington. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Bill.
And we hope you'll stay here. Coming next, we'll talk to a UK astronomer who is excited and knowledgeable about Monday's eclipse. Coming up here on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. Tomorrow is the big day for the solar eclipse. Professor Tom Troland caught my attention as we aired a story about an eclipse, the talk that he was giving over at the University of Kentucky. His enthusiasm for what we're about to go through and is quite rare, and of course is based on the science. We're very delighted that he could spare a few minutes with us before the eclipse and talk about it. Professor, thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Very much. First of all, just describe for us, what is a total eclipse and how rare is it?
Total eclipses occur whenever the moon comes between the sun and the earth. And you might think that would happen every month at new moon, but in fact things don't always line up right. So a total eclipse of the sun somewhere on the Earth occurs roughly once per year. But in order to see that eclipse, you have to be in what's called the path of totality. And the path of totality is this narrow strip of land, thousands of miles wide, but only 100 miles from one side to the other. And so the path of totality only affects a very small part of the Earth's surface. So at a given location, a total eclipse of the sun only occurs every few centuries.
And so this is our opportunity.
This is our opportunity. Well, if you're willing to travel a little bit, there will be other opportunities because there'll be another opportunity in April of 2024 in the same general area. But this is definitely one very important opportunity to see an extraordinary phenomenon.
Where is the best place to see it in Kentucky?
The best place to see it in Kentucky is in western Kentucky. The path of totality is the path that the moon's shadow traces out during the course of the eclipse, and that path of totality eclipse the western part of Kentucky. Paducah, for example, is in that region. Hopkinsville is in that region. Or if you don't restrict yourself to Kentucky, of course, parts of Tennessee, all the way to South Carolina are within this so-called path of totality. You have to be in the path of totality to see the total eclipse. Lexington is not in the path of totality, although there will be interesting things to see here in Lexington.
What do you anticipate people will see in this area?
You mean here in Lexington?
Yes.
Here in Lexington, around 2:30 in the afternoon, the eclipse will be about 95% total. So the sun will be blacked out all but about 5%. And that's an interesting thing to see. The sky will become somewhat darker and shadows will become a little bit sharper. And the animals will be a little bit surprised by what's going on. But it won't be a total eclipse, so it won't get as dark as night as it will in the path of totality for those who have the chance to see the total eclipse. But here in Lexington, it's definitely worth watching.
How long have astronomers known this was coming?
How long, interesting, have astronomers known that? The answer is for centuries. It's possible today, with modern techniques, it's possible to predict eclipses thousands of years in the future. And also it's possible to calculate when eclipses occurred thousands of years in the past. So we've known about this eclipse, well, probably for a century or more, ever since it was possible to make this type of calculation. So for example, we know the last total eclipse that was visible here in Lexington as a total eclipse was in 1869. And for those who don't get out too much and insist on staying in Lexington and ask when's the next total eclipse visible in Lexington, the answer is 2153. So plan ahead for that.
Oh, right. Plan accordingly. As people are making plans to look at this, and you brought along a pair of eclipse glasses, very important that you not look directly at the sun with the naked eye.
That's exactly right. On any day of the year, if you go outside and stare at the sun, you will damage your eyes. So a total eclipse is no different. It's not that the sun is more dangerous on the day of a total eclipse. It's just that on the day of a total eclipse, there is more reason to look at the sun. So here in Lexington, the eclipse will never be total. At all times during tomorrow's eclipse, it's important, if you look directly at the sun, to have a pair of eclipse glasses like this. So you put these on, you look up at the sun, and your eyes are completely safe. These are very, very dark. The only thing you can see through these eclipse glasses is the sun. And looking at the sun through these glasses is entirely safe. So it's very, very important, unless you are in the total eclipse zone, which is not Lexington, and unless you are observing the sun during the total eclipse, when it is safe to look directly. At any other time, make sure you have your eclipse glasses on.
So you should be able to see the outline of the moon passing through, right?
Here's roughly what will happen. Around 1 o'clock, when you look up with your eclipse glasses, you'll see a tiny bite taken out of the sun as the moon begins to move in front of the sun. And then you look again maybe 10 minutes later and you'll see a bigger bite. And as time goes on, for about an hour and a half until around 2:30, more and more of the sun will be covered up. Here in Lexington at 2:30, you have 95% covering up, and then for the next hour and a half, things get uncovered.
So it'll be sort of like before and after sunset.
Right. Although here in Lexington, except around mid-eclipse, around 2:30 in the afternoon, it won't be too obvious. The thing is, when the sun gets more and more covered, for most of that time, as the sun gets more and more covered, the eye adjusts. So the eye isn't so aware of the fact that it's gotten darker. But around mid-eclipse here in Lexington, with 95% of the sun covered, you will notice definitely a darkened landscape.
You may note that animals obviously don't know this is coming and may come out of their hiding places.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Something to watch. Go ahead.
Animals, of course, as you say, don't know what's going on, and so they make noises. Birds, for example, appear to go to roost. It's just an interesting phenomenon to see the animals quite confused by this phenomenon.
Over the years, people have viewed events like this with intrigue and even fear. Should there be any concern about communications equipment, that kind of thing? Do we have any reason to have any concerns that we know about Monday?
There are no concerns associated with an eclipse of the sun that we know about today. In ancient times, of course, they didn't understand thoroughly what caused an eclipse of the sun, and so you can imagine if on a perfectly sunny day the sun suddenly disappeared, that would engender fear in human populations as well as, we said, animals. But as far as the science is concerned, as far as communications, there's absolutely nothing as we understand it in modern times that can come from a total eclipse that's dangerous, except if you look at the partial eclipse and you don't have the proper eye protection. That's the only thing that you have to worry about.
And you do have some concerns that people will have some damage afterward who have not heeded that advice.
That's right. That's right. If you don't use these eclipse glasses and you do stare at the sun, you almost certainly will damage your eyes.
Dr. Tom Troland is a professor of astronomy at the University of Kentucky, and we're going to come back. I want to ask him what it's like to discuss this here at the beginning of the school year with students and some other things here in just a moment on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We welcome you back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers, continuing our discussion with Dr. Tom Troland, who teaches physics and astronomy at the University of Kentucky on the eve of the total eclipse that we'll be seeing, at least in part of Kentucky. An eclipse, you would just call it here in Lexington, right?
It's a partial eclipse here in Lexington, that's right.
Now, you told me that you have tried to see, what, 5?
I've tried to see 5 eclipses in my lifetime, yes.
And how successful were you?
I have been successful on 2 occasions. The other 3 were adversely affected by weather. That's always a risk, of course. But I have to say, seeing a total eclipse, which I've seen now twice without problems with weather, seeing a total eclipse is one of the most memorable events in my life. It's just an extraordinary event. It's probably the most spectacular event in nature that's predictable. It is an event that you will never forget. You don't have to be an astronomer. For me, it's not actually the astronomy of it, it's the aesthetics of it. Seeing an extraordinary phenomenon of nature that is rarely seen by most human beings and is truly striking. I will never forget the times when I saw total eclipses of the sun.
Do you forget your scientist for a second?
I do, yes, absolutely. Because the research I do in astronomy has nothing to do with eclipses. So for me, I'm there to observe nature. I'm there to take pleasure in nature. And I will make a suggestion for those lucky enough to be in the total eclipse path and who therefore see the total eclipse, weather permitting. I recommend that you just stare in awe at that phenomenon of nature. Don't spend those precious 2 or 3 minutes, if you're lucky enough to see the total eclipse, don't spend those precious 2 or 3 minutes looking through a camera viewfinder or fiddling with equipment. Let other people take the pictures. You can see them the next day or even later that day on the internet. I recommend if you see the eclipse, especially as a total eclipse, take in that experience, drink it in, so to speak. Enjoy this extraordinary phenomenon with your own eyes.
What's it like to discuss this with students on campus?
Well, I'll be interested to see what student reactions were. We will be beginning classes very soon, so by the time we begin classes, the eclipse will have taken place already, and I'll be interested to get student responses and student experiences. But I'll say this, I've been teaching for 35 years at the University of Kentucky. I've known about this eclipse since the time I came here. Every semester I've taught astronomy, I have always told the students about this eclipse. And so that's now many, many decades of building up enthusiasm for this eclipse. So here's what I hope. I hope that thousands of my former students, and there have been thousands of students in my classes because I teach large classes, I'm hoping thousands of my students will see the eclipse and maybe some of them will think, oh yeah, I first heard about that in that guy Troland's astronomy class years ago.
They'll think back to you.
I hope so, maybe not.
We really need. With all the drama that we have among people on Earth today, and we had the mayor here a little bit ago, how much perspective, Professor, does an event like this give that We're a small part of the universe.
Well, I think astronomy as a whole gives a certain perspective of our place in the universe. Astronomy itself is a curiosity-driven science. That is to say, the reason for doing astronomy is not to improve people's lives. There are many science fields that do that, and that's important, of course. But the reason why we study astronomy is in order to understand better our place in the universe. Human beings have a curiosity about such questions. They always have. And an eclipse like this draws attention to our place in the universe. It draws attention to the fact that there are phenomena in the sky that we can observe and that we can appreciate and we can wonder about.
Our meteorologist, Chris Johnson's just off camera over here, so the pressure's kind of on the weather, folks.
He's promised me good weather, by the way. He has promised me good weather.
So you're hoping for that. And you're going out to Paducah?
Actually, the Nashville area.
Nashville
Area, yes. Yeah. We're going to be, wife and family and some friends are going to be out there, and we're hoping for the best.
All right, an eclipse party, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well,
what we've decided to do is rain or shine, have a good time. So
yeah,
we hope to celebrate the eclipse, but if not, we will commiserate our
very good.
problem.
Well, I appreciate you coming, and I'm glad we brought you in because it obviously does add to the excitement to know more about it.
I hope many, 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 many people see this eclipse, especially as a total eclipse, but if not, at least see the eclipse as a partial eclipse here. It's an exciting thing to see. I recommend everybody make an effort to see it.
Thanks again. Thank you for joining us for WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. Have a good week ahead.